Hi everyone, my name's Ed. I run these creative talks which I'll be running monthly starting next month, and yeah, today we are going to talk about imposter syndrome. So yeah, does anyone know what imposter syndrome is? Nope? Good. We'll talk about it. So before we get started, I'm going to quickly say what we do here at LED. So LED is a community interest company for the purpose of building a creative community in Ipswich. And what we do is that we network with lots of different creatives, whether you're an artist, writer, filmmaker, video producer, dancer, actor. We want to know you, we want to have you come to us, and we want to be that central hub where if you want to look for someone, you know who to look for.
I can't hear at the back.
Huh?
Speak a bit up a bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
So another thing that we do is that we want to promote those who need promoting. And if anyone's doing anything interesting, we want to know about it so that we can tell you who we can show you to promote you better. We also want to advocate for the next generation as well. We want younger people to get into the creative arts, creative fields of creative professions. And yeah, that's kind of what we do at LED. Joining me today is Jim Horsfield, and he has his own video producing company called As Described. Do you want to quickly tell people what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, hello, thank you for coming down on a sunny Sunday afternoon. So there's a number of bits which I do, but we're going to talk about As Described very briefly, which is we have a strapline which is we make stuff happen with video. So we do the traditional sort of video production, promos, corporate videos, editing that any traditional production company would do, but we also specialise in video projection, doing large-scale venues, sort of Royal Albert Hall, Union Chapel, and as part of that we have, I run As Described with a business partner, and we both started out 15, 20 years ago as VJs, working in clublands, in dingy little clubs in London and Birmingham and Bristol, and developed that on to then do live visuals for touring artists and rock and roll bands and electronic artists. So we, As Described, has sort of toured extensively with people like Portishead, worked with electronic artists like John Hopkins, extensively with a guy called Beardy Man, who's a world beatbox champion, going on tour with him. And we spent sort of 10 years touring with rock and roll bands, going around the world, playing at festivals and gigs.
Doing all the visual stuff that you saw just before we started the talk.
Yes, there's a quick brief excerpt of some of the stuff that we do, the sort of the live visual stuff. So it's basically we make stuff happen with video because we do production, but we also do live visuals and touring.
And then you also created the Geminate project.
Yes, the Geminate project was a spin-off from the live visual work that we did. Which was if you were here before it started, there were a couple of videos that were shown with an interactive installation that we've had placed at various different places. One of them was Ipswich about 4 years ago. We've also done it down in Worthing, and we sort of put it up in art installations all over the UK. And that was a spin-off of some of the visual work that we did with Beardy Man. And in summary, because I could go on at length about it, we created a live video synthesizer which we could take out on tour. And create visuals and abstract visuals in the moment.
And you also are part of Screen Suffolk.
Yes, as well as doing the other stuff, I work as Operations and Business Development Manager, which is the longest title I've ever had in my working life. And I work for Screen Suffolk, which is the county's film office, and we work with incoming productions that come into Suffolk, whether it be a TV series or a documentary, through to feature films. So we worked with Yesterday last year. Yeah. Recently we were working with, there's a film being shot at the moment called The Dig, which is being shot in and around Snape last week with Ray Fiennes and Kerry Mulligan. So we do lots of sort of permitting and working with film companies.
So, what is imposter syndrome? So there's the term imposter syndrome was coined in 1975 by Clance and Imes. It's the psychological experience of believing that one's accomplishments came about not through genuine ability, but as a result of having been lucky, having worked harder than any other person, and or having manipulated other people's impression of like you kind of faked it to make it. And that's kind of what imposter syndrome. When was the last time you had imposter syndrome?
I've not had imposter syndrome for quite a long time. Actually, until Ed asked me about 3 months ago, would I do a talk about imposter syndrome? And he's a bit like, why is he asking me to do a talk about imposter syndrome? I'm an imposter. What do I know about that? So that was the last time, was when you asked me to do a talk about imposter syndrome.
For me, last time I had a serious case of imposter syndrome was I went to this film and TV networking event in Colchester, and everyone was a actor, video producer, director, writers that have done so much incredible work, and I was like, do you want to come to a meetup? It was like, and I felt so out of place. It was just like, but then when I started talking to them, they were really interested about what I was doing, and then I kind of eased myself into it. But that initial shock of I don't belong here, I don't really know what to say, I don't know what to do. It's kind of like until someone snaps you out of it, you're kind of stuck in that state.
Yeah.
So why are we like this?
Well, I think it's kind of almost a kind of belief that when you're in a situation, you're not kind of worthy of being there. And there's doubts, especially if you're doing something that's new and it's a new experience or a new place that you're in. There's naturally going to be nerves and an trepidation about what's happening and the situation, environment that you're in. And I think that it's, I would kind of worry like this because it's partially also because you're in a new situation. You don't necessarily know the people that are there, but I think it's a realisation that actually possibly the reason that you've been invited to be there is because you have skills that you don't necessarily see are valid or equal to the other people that you see that are in the room. It's
noting that you are talented, but you don't see it yourself because it's exactly, normal for you.
Yes, yeah.
And once someone tells you that, oh, you're doing really good stuff, you're kind of like, oh, it's just normal. It's not something special, and it's just from a different point of view. You don't see that from inside. You see it when you get noticed outside. Yes, yeah. And the root cause for imposter syndrome is that when we were growing up, we always get told we're all special. And then there comes a realization in our teens that we're not special. Yeah. And then as we kind of need to grow out of that funk as well before we realize, oh, what we are doing is actually quite special because there's only one of us. We're all doing something unique. And that uniqueness, you kind of can't find it anywhere else unless someone notes it for you. And so why is imposter syndrome bad?
I think imposter syndrome is bad because it can restrict opportunities. Yeah. It may make you uncomfortable in a situation that will help progress your career or your practice. But it's basically, it can be bad because it can take away confidence, it can affect your mental health, and it damages your confidence.
Yeah. It debilitates you completely when it comes to opportunities as well.
Yes.
You can't, like, have any of you tried to write a CV and realised you haven't done anything? It's like, and then when you try and hand that CV in, you're kind of talking yourself out of it from like they're not going to like this CV, like why bother? And that kind of debilitates you completely from taking opportunities that are within your grasp. You just need to be confident to do it. Do you agree?
I do, yes, yeah. I think it's really important that that you have confidence in your abilities. But I know that we'll sort of go on to that a bit later on.
So fake it until you make it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. It's a really, really good thing. I've got an example where I faked it till I made it, which was the first documentary that I made. I used to work in the coffee industry. I should say as well, I have no creative qualifications on paper. So I've not studied. I studied hotel and catering management at university, and basically got into this field and don't have any qualifications. But in order to do the live visuals and do the clubland stuff, which then led on to everything else, I did thousands and thousands of hours of practice. So that was my education. Sitting at home in a bedroom, in a studio, practicing and practicing and practicing. And that's how I kind of got confident and got the abilities, was basically by practicing and putting the hours in and becoming an expert by that. But there's loads of times when I faked it till I made it. So the first documentary I made was for Fatboy Slim. Many years ago, when he was one of the biggest dance producers around, sort of in the sort of Rockefeller Skank days, sort of like 20 years ago. Made a documentary. Was told to come along and film Fatboy Slim at Brixton Academy, make a little promo video. And I went in, and it was suddenly like, before I went in, I've got lights. How do I use lights? I've never used lights before. I'd only ever made little home videos for friends, and friends had taken video cameras on holiday and had to give us the tapes. I'll kind of make a little documentary, and that's how I learned how to edit. And I basically went and I messed up massively with the microphones, had no idea what I was doing. And on the way there, YouTube was just come in, and on the train on the way there, I Googled how to light an interview, because I had no idea. I knew that everyone had told you need to use 3-point lighting for making a documentary or for interviewing people. And I just Googled how to do 3-point lighting. And then you walk into the room with confidence, allegedly, having never done it before, and had a very basic concept, but actually then I was there and in front of Norman, who's done loads and loads of interviews, and you're like, I'm just going to tweak that key light and that backlight, I'm just going to move that across, and it worked. It worked, and there's lots of other situations. I was chatting to someone a few days ago, and they said that they'd applied for a job and said they could do Photoshop, and actually they had no idea how to use Photoshop, and it's for a design job. He said, can you do this on Photoshop? It was like, yeah, no problem, I'm just going to pop to Lou. And they're on the phone to their friend in Bristol saying like, how do I do this? What do you do? What buttons do I press? And actually then came out and were able to kind of have a basic understanding of what they were doing and just faked it, and had the confidence that they could do it. Because actually another thing as well is the chances are the other people possibly don't know how to use Photoshop anyway. So if you know how to do 5 or 6 different things, you're going to look like a pro anyway, and you're going to look more advanced than they are. So I really do think faking till you make it. Do a bit of research beforehand, but you may not get the experience to do something until you're actually in a live situation. So yeah, by all means, fake it till you make it.
And you've got an interesting story about after the Fatboy Slim interview, how you got other jobs as well.
Oh yeah, basically got the Fatboy Slim documentary, which was edited into a 15-minute promo for YouTube, and then got a phone call saying turn it into a 27-minute or it's going on Channel 4 next week. And it's like, what's going on? I've got no idea, and literally no idea what I was doing. Managed to extend it out, put some more B-roll in and fill it out. And then from there on in, when everybody says, what projects have you worked on? It's like, oh yeah, I've just done a documentary for Channel 4 on Fatboy Slim. And that, it immediately gives you credibility. And people are like, oh, he's just done a Channel 4 documentary. He must know what he's doing. He's a pro, he knows what he's doing. So if you kind of get one thing you can kind of pin on to build your reputation, or something which sounds impressive. I mean, you go back and watch it now, it's terrible. I'd be embarrassed to put it out now, but at the time, it was on Channel 4. It was on at 2:30 in the morning on Channel 4, and nobody watched it, but it doesn't matter. You've got a Channel 4 credit. You've made a sort of this Channel 4 and this sort of Fatboy Slim thing.
So after that, did you still feel like an imposter, or did that help build your confidence?
I mean, it really helped build my confidence, because you kind of spin a line, and eventually you walk in with a swagger, and you walk in with, well, I can do this. I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. Look, I've done a documentary for Channel 4 on Fatboy Slim, and you keep on spinning it, and you keep on talking about it, and people, it gives you credibility for people to then give you confidence in your abilities. And then next time around, you sort of like, well, actually, I actually know how to do lighting now, so I feel confident on that, and that sort of stuff. So it does build confidence, and it's about sort of doing the next project, getting more experience, and then you become more confident in what you're doing.
And it helps when you're a quick learner as well. You do it once or twice,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
you keep it in your memory because it's something that you've done before and it's important.
Well, that's it, exactly. And it builds confidence, and and actually it's always going back and reviewing what you've done previously to say, actually, well, next time I wouldn't do that, I would do this. And then you're in a live situation and you practice it and you go, actually, that doesn't work, but this might work. And over time and over projects, you end up building the confidence so you actually do know what you're doing. And before you know it, you've actually become an expert.
And learning from your mistakes is one of the most important things.
Massively.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in editing, you can fluff stuff and hide edits. And if you fluff something up, you can kind of change it around, and you learn very quickly how to be a creative editor to cover up your mistakes.
One of the best stories I've ever heard. Edgar Wright, famous director of like Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
He said that when he did his first film, he shot a 90-minute feature film,
Yeah.
but only had 90 minutes worth of film
Yeah.
on the thing. So when it came down to editing, he had a lot of big gaps because he had to cut a lot of stuff that wasn't working to make it flow better. But then it wouldn't be a feature film unless it reached that 90-minute mark. So he had to slow a lot of things down to drag it all over. But then that's how he learned, like, from his first experience.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
And yeah, so even the pros make mistakes.
I think when you first start out, everybody's faking it. The first time you started, everybody's faking it, whatever you're doing. Whether it's producing or filming or dance or whatever, you're all you think you can rehearse and you can be as well practiced as you want to be, but actually the first few times you are faking it because you're just learning the process and getting more experience.
So how do you turn all that into a positive?
I think if you walk into a room and you feel as though you've got imposter syndrome, actually the chances are there's a lot of other people that are there thinking exactly the same, but they won't show it. And to be honest, everybody's faking it. One of the things about sort of being an expert and rising in your field in whatever expertise you might be in is that everybody who's good thinks that there are gaps in their knowledge. So if you're there as an expert, you've always got gaps in your knowledge. I've got loads of gaps in my knowledge. Everyone else is probably thinking that, and they're thinking, well, I'm not an expert because I've got a gap in my knowledge. But you have to reflect on what you do know and be confident in the areas that you do know and talk about those with authority, because actually you are an expert in that. You might not be an expert in an offshoot to the subject that you're talking about, but the chances are if you've been asked to go and do something, they've asked you to go there for a reason, because they believe that you are an expert or you have the ability to do the task or the project that you're working on. So I think it's really believe in what you are doing. I think it's worth kind of saying as well, kind of to break it all down to almost kind of nothing. It might be, say for example, editing. So I don't edit drama stuff. It's not my forte. I don't really enjoy it. But give me multicam work and promo work and interview work, and I absolutely love it, absolutely thrive on it. And that's what I enjoy doing. But it doesn't mean that I'm not an expert because I can't do drama stuff. So whatever field you're working in, it might be that you haven't found your particular niche yet within that particular area. So there might be, in dance, it might be that you can't do one style, but you're absolutely brilliant at the other. And it may be that you haven't found that yet, but you won't find out what you don't want until you've actually done the stuff. And it's almost like a sort of reverse thing. I used to work in coffee bars and restaurants many years ago. An operations person sort of said to me, I had to go and look at a new coffee bar and see what worked well. And actually he went in and said, don't go in and look for what works well, because actually if it works well, it will just happen, and it's like a swan just gliding along the water. Go in and look for the things that you don't like and then reverse them to find out the things that you do want. Because our brains are generally negative. You kind of look at things and sort of say, oh, I don't like that, and I don't like that, and I don't like that. So write all that stuff down and try it. And if you don't like it, flip it and say, well, I don't like, in the coffee bar, instead, I don't like the way the staff are speaking to me. We'll actually turn it around and go, well, actually, I want the staff to speak like that. So go in with a negative thing and then flip them to then find out what you do want and what you can do.
And another thing that I wanted to mention was a mutual friend of ours, Jill Allard.
Yes.
She said she suffers from imposter syndrome, and what happens to her is that because she feels like she's not good enough, it makes her work even harder to try and fill that gap of not feeling ready.
Yeah.
She works even harder, and that kind of drives you to do better stuff.
Yeah.
So imposter syndrome isn't always a bad thing. It can be turned into a positive if you have the right mindset to use it as a driving force.
Which is as well, Jill Allard won Sky Photographer of the Year, and she still has massive, massive self-doubts. But I think, and there's also, I mean, the stuff that I've done creatively is a lot of performances on stage, working with bands and that sort of stuff. And there's a very fine line between feeling anxious and nerves.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a very fine line between the two. So I've done hundreds and hundreds of festival gigs and work at events around the world, and sometimes you might be going on stage in front of 50 people, you might be going on stage in front of 25, 30,000 people. I still feel nervous. Having done hundreds and hundreds of performances, I still feel nervous going on stage, and that's a good thing because it means you actually care about what you're doing. And getting sort of nervous kind of raises your adrenaline, which then gets you in the right mindset for going out and doing a performance. So it's really, really important.
And you get that rush after the...
You do, yes, yeah. But there's a very fine line between feeling anxious and being nervous, and and I think it's important to be nervous. Having played with some people that are massive rock and roll stars and that sort of stuff, you would notice before a show, there's all the kind of rock and roll banter and messing about at airports, and I mean, one thing we used to do was set off chicken noises in the line to sort of queuing up for airlines, and there's all this kind of ridiculous banter that's going on like in a tour bubble. But half an hour before the show would start, everybody kind of went quiet, and everyone was off in their own spaces. One person I used to work with used to go and meditate for 20 minutes before they go on stage. And it's actually getting your mind prepared and ready to do the performance or the piece or whatever it is that you're doing. Because if you do that, if you're really blasé about it, then it means, do you actually care about it? It means you've gone off the boil. So I think it's really important. You do feel nervous, but there is a difference between nervousness and anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah.
Resolving the inner conflict. So when it comes to imposter syndrome, a lot of it is in our own heads. Like, there's always a voice in the back of your head knocking you down, telling you you're not good enough, you're not ready for this, you shouldn't do this, why are you doing this? And one of the things I've learned over the last few months is if you had someone else say those things to you, you wouldn't take that. Like, if someone said that to your face, you would argue, you would fight your corner. But because it's in your own head, you're kind of listening to that voice. And it's all about learning to fight your own corner in your head.
It is doing a bit of research for this sort of beforehand. One sort of thing which I came up with, which was written down, is like, which really kind of resonated with me, which is when you feel like a fraud, could it be in relation to some perfection that never actually existed? So actually, what are you judging yourself? Why are you feeling like an imposter? Is it something which you've set in your mind that doesn't actually exist? Or is it like an external thing?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I mean, another thing is that if you care about the project or the performance, whatever it is that you're doing, that's kind of a really good sign. You'd also have to actually ask, and this is in very rare situations, is I was chatting to someone else that works as a choreographer yesterday, and they were kind of saying, well, actually, double check. If you haven't got sort of like qualifications, if you haven't spent time on the project, and you haven't training up and preparing for this performance, there will be very few people that actually, are you actually an imposter? Is this actually the right thing for you to be doing? Somebody gave me an analogy where they had a friend who went and sort of did yoga for a couple of weeks, and then they kind of came back and they're like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. And actually, well, they are an imposter, and they've almost got too much confidence in their own abilities to think, well, actually, I can just go and do this. Well, actually, they are an imposter in that kind of situation. But yeah, sort of like, if you've got the imposter syndrome and it's like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough for this, actually, where does that come from? What mark are you judging that against? Are you judging it against a perfection which is never going to be attained? Or you mark it against something which is actually a real life thing?
I think a lot of people mark it against someone who's achieved something already.
Yes,
so
yeah.
You have, say you're a painter and you want to paint like Da Vinci.
Yeah.
And you start drawing and you start painting, and then you realise you're a long way from Da Vinci.
Yes. Yeah.
But what you're judging yourself on is his final piece, and it's never his journey. And what we really need to stop doing is saying, this is crap, this is great, so I'm just going to stop.
Yeah.
What you really want to do is, this is crap, but I'm going to keep on doing it until I'm great. And you need to have that mindset of, no matter where you are on your journey, you can always get there if you spend enough time on it. It's not something that requires talent, it's something that requires dedication and passion.
Yes, yeah. And if you do something wrong, it doesn't necessarily make it fake.
Yeah.
That's really important as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And everyone, like I said before, everyone's different, everyone's unique.
Yes.
And like you said, we have to find our own niche.
Yes, yeah.
And yeah, until you have that mindset to say, what I'm doing is good,
Yeah.
you don't feel like you're quite there yet. And
Yes.
yeah, you need to have that swagger as well. And I think
Having confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence in your abilities, and confidence comes from hours spent, whether it's at university or art school or wherever it may be, but confidence comes from hours spent.
Yeah. Getting yourself confidence. How?
Well,
Like you said, it is just spending time on getting that craft. Whatever you are, a musician, you have to play that song 10,000 times before you get that song right. Or you have to experiment and find out that what you're doing is different, but it's good in its own right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How have you got any advice for anyone to?
I think I think I can sort of speak as a performer, because that's sort of like the area that I sort of worked in. It comes down to practice. It comes down to hours, and I used to spend hundreds of hours in a bedroom listening to dance music, practicing on a little old laptop, and then because I wanted the experience, I actually wanted gig practice. I helped set up a nightclub in Birmingham where I had to do every 2 weeks. So I had to VJ for 8 hours a weekend on a Saturday night, you're doing from like sort of 6 in the evening through till 2 in the morning or whatever. And I used that as a learning opportunity. And some of it was good, perhaps 20 minutes a night was good when I first started out, but the balance kind of shifted over a couple of years. When you've kind of done thousands of hours, you kind of learn what works and what doesn't. So there might be an experience or an opportunity where you're going out and doing a performance, learn from it and try things out. And every time you go on stage and do something, you might figure out, oh, that 30 seconds was really good, I'm going to learn from that. And then the next week that 30 seconds becomes a minute, and then it becomes 5 minutes, and it becomes half an hour. And then you kind of go into the bit where you just can't wait to get on stage and do it, because you want to learn more and try out new things, and you kind of know that you've got this solid basis of, well, I know that I can do an hour and a half of amazing stuff. So let's make it a 3-hour set. All right, I'm going to do an hour and a half of stuff that I know is going to work, and then I'm going to spend half an hour experimenting and seeing. And some of it doesn't, some of it works, and some of it doesn't.
And yeah, another thing I wouldn't say is a good way of gaining self-confidence is by talking to people, because like I said at the start, it's only when someone outside tells you you're doing something good, you kind of like think, okay, maybe I am doing something good. And it's one of those things where once that switch flicks in the back of your mind, and you kind of like lower the negative voice in your head, and you're kind of thinking, maybe the more I do this, the more I get confidence for it. And that debilitating imposter syndrome becomes less and less and less and less, and it comes down to practice again.
It comes down to experience and having belief, but I think as well, sort of, if you have got imposter syndrome and you're sort of trying to get over it, then just try and find someone that's close to you that you can honestly speak to and say, what do you think? Because actually you'll learn from asking people that may be more experienced or further ahead on the journey than you are, and find someone that you really trust that can give criticism, constructive criticism. So I used to come off stage and people are like, wow, that's amazing, that's brilliant. They might have been a bit drunk at the time because you're kind of generally in clubland and festivals. But actually the question I wanted to ask was, what didn't you like? Because people would come and say, we love this, we think that's brilliant. Well, actually, I know that bits of that are brilliant because I've been told that lots of times before. Well, actually, what bit do you think didn't work? And then you kind of learn from it, and then your skills get better, you feel more confident, and you go in with more confidence knowing what you're doing is going to work.
So how does it affect you? Once you have confidence, how does it affect you? Like, do you still have imposter syndrome, or do you just keep it in the back of your mind and never?
I generally don't have imposter syndrome now if I'm going and doing something which I've done many times before and I've kind of repeated. Having confidence in what I do and go out and show on a screen during a show.
But stuff like this.
But stuff like this is new for me. I mean, as I said, sort of, I had a real sort of crisis of confidence. Like, why am I being asked to talk about imposter syndrome? I'm an imposter. Why is this happening? But actually, if something is new, then I'm more likely to have doubts about what I'm doing and how I'm going around doing something. But it comes down to kind of experience.
Yeah, and that experience made you say yes.
Exactly. Well, that's just it.
Yeah. You're kind of, because you've got experience of saying yes to things, you're like, yeah, I'll try it. And then even though after you say yes, you're kind of like, what? Why?
So why should I do that? And that's it. And there's other things where, I mean, another phrase which I kind of used in the past is that I have had lucky breaks. I think everybody has a lucky break in whatever form they do, but the harder I work, the luckier I get. So you put more graft in and you go out for more opportunities. I used to do sales for a while, and it's a cliche, but every no brings you closer to a yes, which is terrible. I hate it, but it kind of stands up the time. It's true that actually if you ask to do one thing and you get turned down, that could knock your confidence, think, well, actually I am an imposter. But actually, are you fully exploring all the opportunities of where you could take your practice?
And it's also thinking outside the box, because even if someone says no to you, you're kind of like, maybe I can find another way around it. And that comes with experience.
And it might be that the person that said no is not right for you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking every opportunity that you can.
Yeah, and seeing an opportunity when you can.
Yeah.
Because like there's a lot of things going wrong in the world. I don't know if you've noticed. But because things are going wrong, there's always an opportunity somewhere else, because it's like a bed sheet, like a duvet. You pull it up one side and then another side sticks out.
Yeah.
So opportunity, you take away something on one side, another opportunity arises. Well,
that's it. I think with it as well, it's kind of very, very important that you stop comparing yourself to other people who are in a similar field. You mentioned the sort of the Da Vinci thing earlier on. You are you. What you do is your practice, and if you believe in it, you'll take it forward. But don't necessarily compare yourself. When I first started out, I remember one of the sort of the moments in my career when I was like, that's what I want to do, is I was at a festival many years ago and walked into a dance tent, 8,000 people, absolutely going for it, masses of screens all over the place. And it was a mate of mine that was doing the visuals. And I'd never seen him do it in that situation. I walked in, it was like, that's what I want to do. How can I do that? I'm never going to be as good as him. I'm never going to get into that situation where I was just sort of in a dance tent sort of Saturday night at a massive festival. And by kind of go, well, actually, no, I'm not going to compare myself to him because he's got his own path. I'm going to see what I can do and see if I can get there. And actually, 2 years later, I was in exactly the same situation that he was in a dance tent, 10,000 people, sort of 3 o'clock in the morning, absolutely going for it. So it's kind of don't compare yourself with that other person that necessarily does.
And finding your own path. Like,
that's really important.
Yeah. Like there is no set path to a success, and you have to try and find your own path to what you deem as success.
And everybody has their first exhibition. Everybody has their first gig, their first show, and at that point realise that actually nobody knows what they're doing. It's a bit like sort of parenthood to some sense, in some sense, that you kind of like you have a child. nobody knows what they're doing for the first couple of years. Well, actually, people don't know what they're doing for the first 18 years. But sort of nobody really knows what they're doing when you first start out, but gradually you ease into it and you kind of get confidence and then kind of move forward.
Yeah. So, methods to manage. Do you have any methods to manage imposter syndrome?
I think accept that you've got some role in your success.
Yeah.
So you need to believe in what you're doing. And then I think sort of remind yourself of why people asked you to be there. Because they would have only invited you to do something if they believed and saw that there was something there. So I think that's really important. Depending on sort of who you are, keep a file of nice things that people have said, so affirmations, and kind of say, well, actually, this person said this really good thing. And a lot of people think negatively. Their kind of initial thought is no, as opposed to yes. I know I'm definitely like that. I kind of realise that actually people ask me to do something, but like, give me 5 minutes, come round and think, well, actually, yes, I can do that. And think about, if people say something nice, just have a little affirmations book or something. Sort of somebody said, that was really nice, they loved that I did. Actually remember that, because that's going to give you confidence.
It's nice to look back at something like physical. Like,
yes, yeah.
Because if it's just something you kept in the back of your mind, that voice kind of takes over again.
Yeah.
And one of the methods I use is basically have a blank piece of paper and have that fight in your head written down. So have that have a conversation between you and your negative voice. So you write down what your negative voice is saying, and then come up with an argument to fight against that. Yeah. So I'm not good enough, but I can be. You don't deserve this. Who else is going to do this? And once you've written like a page worth of this conversation, fight your corner and just cross out all the negative voices, and then just read the positive ones. Yeah.
It sounds like a great idea. And I think that the other thing as well is, if you're going into a situation, the chances are you've been brought in because you're deemed to be an expert or very good at what you're doing. And to be honest, you might only need to know 2% more than the other person, well, you're then the expert in the room. So actually speak with confidence, because the chances are you know more than the other person.
And yeah, I think that's it for. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask about imposter syndrome, or anything they want to know about Jim?
I was just interested, I'm only after moving locally to Suffolk. What development is that? I know you've got connections with Screen Suffolk.
Yeah.
What development is there with Screen Suffolk for local talent? I know you bring in and look after productions coming in.
Yes, yeah.
Or local people in Suffolk, what development is there with
At the moment, there are some things that may happen in the next kind of 6 months or so, which I can't go into details with at the moment. There is stuff that is being worked on, but primarily Screen Suffolk is the film office, and we sort of permit filming for incoming productions and sort of manage locations. If you're looking to kind of get into the industry, they also run we run a database of local crew. We've got I think it's up to about 300 local crew and 120 odd people that are looking for kind of work experience. And what I'd say is register with Screen Suffolk, and then as any opportunities arise, then those opportunities, if you're a DOP, if an incoming production asks us for a DOP, we can kind of send the details on. But there are sort of, for younger people, there's things like the BFI Film Academy, which is run by Creative Nation, that's held and that's sort of for young filmmakers. The film industry in Suffolk at the moment is kind of is very emerging. So Screen Suffolk's been going for a couple of years so far, and to build up an industry, which we're trying to do, takes a long time. It's really a 5 to 10 year thing. So you look at somewhere like Northern Ireland with Game of Thrones, or Cardiff with Doctor Who, or Yorkshire with the sort of Screen Yorkshire, where they've got things like Elizabeth and Peaky Blinders and other things like that. It takes 10 years for that to kind of happen, because it needs to have the crew. If you are technically, there's 5 people or under not using a tripod, therefore not causing an obstruction, you don't need to get a permit. Okay. Once you're over 5 people, or if you're using a tripod, so technically you're using an obstruction on the pavement, then if it's on-street filming 5 people or less, you don't need a permit. If you're shooting a location, which would be somewhere like Christchurch Park, then yes, you need to go through them to get a permit. And it could be, I think, for if you're a student or or a charity type thing, it's like 15 quid for a permit. Or if you're shooting kind of commercially on the streets, 50 quid a day for that.
Sorry, just one more thing. Is there funding involved? Is there like funding to develop productions, or is that just something that's going to come down?
Hopefully that may happen in the future. At the moment, Screen Suffolk doesn't offer any funding because we're primarily a film office, permitting, filming and managing the incoming productions. I don't know where the landscape will be in a couple of years' time, but at the moment, Screen Suffolk isn't able to offer any funding for filming because that's not our role at the moment.
But Screen Suffolk does have a Facebook page where they always announce some opportunities.
Yes, yeah, well that's just it. I know this fine gentleman here is doing his job via seeing the Instagram of Screen Suffolk. We do post up opportunities whenever they come up. So have a look and register on sort of Facebook, Twitter, and got a LinkedIn page as well. So sort of drop us an email.
I've got a question. So Jim, you've successfully transitioned from one career,
Mm-hmm.
completely different, to a new career, I guess in your early to mid-30s.
Yeah.
What elements of have been your transferable skills, would you say? Because I think this would be helpful for anyone transitioning.
Yeah.
Your transferable skills from working in coffee
Yeah.
to working in film. What has bridged it for you as regards to your skills and I guess personality traits?
Good question. Thank you very much, wife. Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Should we start with what do you think?
Yeah. Exactly. So I studied hotel catering and institutional management, another very drawn-out title for a course. I studied that for many years. But actually before that, you kind of go back earlier on when I was at school, I got very heavily involved in lighting and sound. Then did sort of hospitality, set up coffee bars and ran coffee bars for sort of 10 years and that sort of stuff, and did sales for coffee. And then moved into doing visuals. And one of the reasons that, one of the things that kind of works for me is that ultimately it's all events, whether I was doing lighting and sound at school, whether I was doing coffee, opening up new coffee bars, whether I was doing visuals or doing projection or now sort of doing Screen Suffolk, I've always kind of done project management of events. So it's transferring those skills from, originally it could be planning a banquet for 1,000 people. Well, actually it's very similar skills planning a banquet to 1,000 people to bringing in a crew of 180 to shoot a film. It's exactly the same skills with operations. And I also, for my sins, the worst job I ever did is I sold photocopiers door to door for a year. Actually, no, I sold encyclopedias door to door in Australia, and that was even worse. So I've kind of done sales and operations and a lot of sort of presentations. I was a trainer for a while. I used to.
So that really helped you fake it to make it.
Well, exactly, and there was a Fatboy Slim's manager once said something which is really complimentary, which is, Jim, I like what you do because you don't give me bull and you say what you're going to do. So there's a few times when he said, can you do this? And just went, I can't do it. It's out of my abilities. He was like, can you create a graphics package? And I went, actually, no, I can't do that because it is completely out of my skill base, but I have got a mate that can do it. And he went, thank you very much for being honest with me and not giving me bull and saying, yes, I'll do it, and then it's a bad job. So also acknowledge where your skill base is. And there might be stuff that you can't do that you just cannot.
Something you can't Google.
Well, that's just it, exactly. I can't do After Effects. Don't get it, don't understand it, don't understand graphics. So it's not my thing. And there was another thing, I used to work for a guy when I was setting up a coffee company, and he told me a phrase which again he's used all the time, and it's under promise and over deliver. So if people say, can you do this? I might go, let me get back to you, I might be able to do it, knowing damn well that I can do it. And then when you go back a week later and say, yes, I can do it, they're like, okay, brilliant, fantastic. Don't claim to do stuff that you know you can't do.
Yeah.
Because actually you'll just lose credibility from it.
Yeah. And bit about my background is that I went to uni studying video game design, and video game design is a job where you're trying to connect the artists to the programmers and the sound artists all together to make your design and implementation into one coherent thing. And when I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, I wanted to build a creative community, and I saw that as something I could transfer, like I could connect people. That's my job. I can get someone who can do one thing and find someone who does something completely different, but somehow they're going to work together and they can do something really, really good. Yeah. And again, you can find your niche and you can find your strengths in something that you wouldn't think that you could do. Yeah.
So I had no experience of location management, which is ultimately what the Screen Suffolk job is. No experience of it whatsoever. I've got experience of working in videography and film, but I didn't know anything about location management. But I've got all the skills that are required for that, which is operations and project management, and an ability to hopefully be polite and nice to people, and also the ability to say no, because location managers will ask you everything, and it's having the confidence to say no, you can't. There was a film that was shot around here a while ago, and on a Saturday night it was a dystopian future film, and they wanted to hang a dead body from a building that was within sight of the main road, and they're like, we're going to put a dummy up to kind of do the sort of hanging scene, and we just be like, sorry, no, you're not doing that. It's like, why not? Because it's on a strategic road network. No, you are not doing that. Can we please? No, you're not putting a dummy up on a Saturday night at dusk where thousands of cars are going past. So it's an ability to kind of say no, but so it's using transferable skills, and it may be that whatever your practice is, it may not be the niche that actually you're going to end up in, but try it, and if you don't like it, move on and try something else.
Yeah, always keep on trying something new.
Yeah.
Do something that scares you, because that's the only way to grow.
Yes, yeah.
Like, doing this scares the hell out of me. So. But, any more?
Yeah, just I thought when you were saying about the positives of imposter syndrome,
yeah.
in a way, I suppose if you're experiencing it, that's a good thing, because situations where I might experience imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because it is a potential fear, so the very fact that you feel it could be an action.
And if you pass it by every time, that anxiety or that sort of that worry is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, whereas actually you might go and do it and give it a go, and actually it's not too bad. It might be you really don't like it, in which case that's cool. Don't do that again, but you know that you can say, I've tried it, don't like it, move on. As opposed to having in the back of your head, I can't do that because that's not for me, that's not for me. So sometimes it's worth a leap into the dark, and if you don't like it and it feels really uncomfortable, that's cool as well. But you know that you've tried it and you don't want to do it anymore. So.
Any more questions?
My imposter syndrome is slightly different, I think.
Yeah.
In that this is a world in which I'm an imposter.
But I feel the same. I have no qualifications. Yeah. Yeah.
Creativity. I've got nothing like this in my background, and I tripped over doing a thing about a year ago, which is putting films together from iPhones and a drone.
Yeah.
And I find myself amongst people that can paint, can sing, can dance, that are creatives, that are trained, have got skill sets. I drive trains for a flipping living.
Yeah.
This might as well be out of one go.
But I've seen your work and it's beautiful. Like,
I've already paid the £5.
No, the thing is, we're all on a journey. You don't have to be a master of your craft.
The value that I've taken, I'll share this bit because I trip into people who have got the skills, and I can say, look at this, what do you think? Because I don't have assets. I mean, people will say, oh, I like that, but what I need is people that know what they're looking at to go, yeah, I like that, but that's the thing that I need. I need to know what the negative is. But for me, the imposter bit is actually physically being in an environment which is a creative environment, as someone that doesn't consider themselves to be particularly creative.
Yeah.
Well, I completely relate to what you're saying. So when I started I used to write ambient drum and bass, as a lot of people do, very, very badly. It was a hobby. And then I went to a festival, saw visuals happening, had an epiphany. I might have had a few ciders, so it was a little bit enhanced. And I stood in the field and went, that's what I'm going to do. It was like a light bulb moment. I had no idea how to do it, no idea what I was doing, how I was going to do it. And he's like, right, I've got a computer that I can do music on. That's never going to go anywhere. And I borrowed a video camera off my uncle, went out and shot some stuff, and sat down and just spent, and it's just the hours there. Now, I would say that I'm not an artist, but I make creative stuff. And the reason I say I'm not an artist, because in the stuff that I've done where I've been performing, the journey of how I get to what goes out on the screen, to me, is completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter, because ultimately I was working in show business, putting a product on a screen. How you get to that end product in that situation doesn't matter. No one cares in that situation. It's just about how it looks on the screen. And that's the polar opposite of an artist, I think, where a lot of it is about the journey and the process, and it's almost the end result does matter and is very important, but it's how you kind of like grow and learn and go through that experience to get to the end result. So I can completely relate to what you're doing. When I started doing the video stuff, I was a coffee consultant. No experience qualifications whatsoever. I don't have any qualifications in art. Gave up art when I was 15, 16 years old, actually 14 years old. So that's not a barrier for you. It comes down to, in your thing where you're editing, well, that is a craft and a skill. And actually, once you've learned the skill, it's a bit like a carpenter using a plane. You start off and it's not very good, and over time and experience, you kind of build up that toolkit and that skill base to be able to kind of then edit videos together. And you've obviously got a natural eye, having seen what you've done earlier on, you know how to put a story together. And that's not something which necessarily can be taught. That's sort of instinctive, that you know, oh, actually I've had that shot there, well I'm going to cut to that one. And it's not, you haven't necessarily been trained in the artistic route, but you naturally have a brain or an ability to kind of like tell a story, even though you probably don't realise that. But you naturally do it, because it's the same way that the first video I made was going on a 40th birthday for a weekend, and a guy took a video camera along and I just went, give me the videotapes, and I just sat down and taught myself how to edit. And that then hones, and over 10, 15 years, it then becomes a skill, because actually the toolkit part of it, the editing and the moving around and stuff, just becomes second nature, and then you can kind of think wider about, well, actually, how am I going to portray this? What's the story that I'm going to tell? So I think the fact that you're a train driver makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. Yeah.
And I think that's yeah.
That he doesn't know.
Sorry?
That he doesn't know is that, like, because I done the exact same.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a clue what I was getting into.
Yeah.
But I studied as an actor. I didn't want to live the life as an actor, so I went into producing.
Yeah.
I knew I could maybe make a living out of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a clue. I made my first short movie, but I didn't know about, like, from what the roles were, what people's jobs were.
Yeah.
Nothing. But it actually is the best way to do it, because you're not going down the road of, well, I want to be like Scorsese or I want to be this.
Yeah.
You're actually developing your own kind of...
Your own style.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Going
just,
into college and sitting down for 3 years and going, this is how you do it, there's no rule of it.
yeah.
So
I'm in effect, the fraudulent bit is I turn up with nothing to bring to it. I'm basically
You don't have to bring something.
sucking stuff out,
Yeah,
sucking
but that's the
everything out.
best way of doing it, is just to absorb knowledge. And it doesn't make you a fraud, it just makes you want to learn. And that's never a bad thing. And I think that's a good time to end it. So thank you very much for everyone who attended, and I hope you enjoyed this.